It's going to be negative 15, but I'm going to be out there, and I want you to go out there.
They can throw a blizzard at us, and we are going to fight.
They're saying the Trump voter has so much more spirit, dedication, they say they'll walk over at last, that the Trump voter is coming to vote.
Hello, and welcome to a special edition of America Decides. I'm Margaret Brennan. We are on the eve of the first contest in the 2024 primary cycle, the Iowa Republican caucuses. Dangerous weather conditions have held the candidates back from barnstorming the state in the last few days, but there are virtual events underway to get GOP voters out to caucus. Our chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa is at an in-person Trump campaign event in Indianola, Iowa. Bob, people have to be dedicated to go out and make it in person to an event like this. The former president doesn't do a lot of retail politics. He does rallies. What are you hearing from the people in the room about how this strategy is working?
Margaret, it's great to be with you from here in chilly Indianola, Iowa. It's evident here, talking to Trump supporters and Trump campaign officials, that right now in this closing stretch on the eve of the caucuses, it's all about motivating his supporters to come out despite the cold, to not take anything for granted. They're seeing the polls. They know the former president is the front runner here and nationally. But the mood here in Iowa among the Trump people is that they want to run up the score. They don't want Trump to be lingering 5 or 10 points above former Ambassador Nikki Haley or Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. They want him to be in the 40s, maybe even the 50s, eclipse 50% among the caucus goers on Monday night. They believe that could catapult Trump into New Hampshire and then into South Carolina.
Ed O'Keefe is also there in Iowa. Ed, I know there are, 40 delegates at stake ultimately. How many caucus members can even make it to participate?
That's the big question here, Margaret, in the closing hours before we get to Monday. You know, and my attitude about this in our reporting, at least the last few days, is to kind of treat it like you would when you're on a turbulent plane. Keep an eye on the flight attendants, and if they're calm, you can remain calm. In this case, the locals have conceded that this is historically cold, and the campaigns have said it has totally scrambled things. And so there's at least reason to think that it could be an unforeseen and significant variable in getting people out, especially in the more rural, farther reaches of this state, from which former President Trump draws a lot of support, and from which some of the most ardent Republicans in Iowa live and would come from to attend these caucuses. So it may, if turnout is below the record high 186,000 in 2016, it's going to raise questions about whether the caucus system makes sense, because what if people had been able to come during the day, during sunlight hours, even if it's that cold? And then if a candidate doesn't like what they're seeing in these results because of the suppressed turnout driven by the weather, will they raise questions about whether Iowa deserves to keep going first in forthcoming years?
Because that has been an issue with Democrats, of course, when we talk about the difficulties in Iowa. Bob Costa, when we look at the bigger picture of maintaining the lead, you said the Trump campaign wants to run up the scoreboard. How long can some of these other candidates remain in the race, and when will be time to unify around a single candidate?
This is a crossroads for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He has visited all 99 counties in Iowa. He's made a big bet on the caucuses, hoping that support from evangelicals and conservative Republicans looking for a younger generation to take the helm of the Republican Party would give him a shot. But he's never been able to eat into Trump's support in Iowa or nationally in a significant way. He's had a real struggle catching on in Iowa, and we've seen in recent weeks Nikki Haley, the former ambassador, starting to catch up and even go past DeSantis in some of the pollings, as DeSantis just hasn't been able to establish himself as someone who's a viable Trump alternative. But he's not giving up. He's campaigning in the state right now. He's trying his best to really make this a last stand for his campaign, and he's saying he's going to carry on regardless of what happens here. He's trying to schedule some events in South Carolina, but privately, some DeSantis donors and allies are wondering what really would his path ahead be. Should he come in a weak second or a far behind third place here in Iowa? And for entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, who's been campaigning in the mold of Trump, at least ideologically, he's put a huge bet on Iowa as well. If he comes in third or fourth, or even falls closer to fifth place near someone like Asa Hutchinson, you could see Vivek Ramaswamy decide to turn it all in. But all these campaigns right now in the final stretch, they're saying they're all in. They're all in for the long haul until Super Tuesday. But as you know, a day in politics is a lifetime. It could be a different world come Tuesday morning.
Right, and Super Tuesday all the way in March. Can you explain the thinking here? Because we are talking about such an incredible lead by Donald Trump. Is the presumption that the Republican Party needs someone else as a backup plan?
There is a thought right now among some of the biggest donors in the country, and I've spoken to some of them in recent days, that if Nikki Haley can do well enough in Iowa and she can win New Hampshire or come in a close second, then you can expect tens of millions of dollars to start to go behind her campaign and her super PAC to get her ready for Super Tuesday to make this a one-on-one campaign against Trump. Now, that means DeSantis would probably have to get out if he underperforms to really enable Haley to move forward. Chris Christie getting out of the race was helpful to Haley, her associates tell me, in that respect. But at this point, I'm told the money will be there for Haley if she can show momentum and real traction against Trump. But the money's not going to necessarily pour in behind her if she's only getting 15% here come Monday night, Tuesday morning, and then she struggles in New Hampshire. There's a tension now in the GOP at the highest levels, whether it's in Congress among my sources there or among donors, about whether Haley really has a shot to make this a two-person race, or do they have to be in acceptance phase in the coming weeks and really accept that Trump is likely to storm ahead on Super Tuesday and be the Republican nominee. For some in the party, they love that idea. They see Trump as a return to power, not just for him, but for them. But for others who are very wary of Trump, especially after the insurrection, this is a real challenge.
Ed O'Keefe, I know you also cover the Biden White House when you're not in Iowa. But, you know, the Biden team thought or would argue publicly that the president was the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump because he'd done it once before. Given the new polling data that we are seeing, are they getting concerned about the potential of a Haley candidacy here?
No, they're getting annoyed by it, frankly, because it's not polling that's being done in battlegrounds like Michigan or Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania. While it gives a sense of the national mood and a sense that right now the nation, a majority of it would pick the red flavor over the blue flavor, they argue that's not how presidential campaigns are run, and they're certainly not run and held in January. So come April, really, is the date I keep being told that they begin to think that's when the country will realize what's going on here. Donald Trump will have amassed the delegates necessary to be the presumed Republican nominee again, and we can really begin prosecuting the case in a way that the country will be paying attention to if they don't understand and believe what's about to happen here in Iowa and then eventually in New Hampshire and South Carolina, because they continue to believe it will be Donald Trump. If it's not, they say, well, then what is Donald Trump doing at that point? Is he supporting Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley's eventual nomination? History would suggest he won't be. So is he splintering the GOP and making it more difficult for that person who somehow got ahead of him mathematically to be the nominee and the standard bearer? Probably not. So that is to their advantage as well. We'll see. But for now, they sit there waiting, and they know ultimately, or at least they believe, it'll be Trump.
Well, we will see. Thank you very much, Bob and Ed. CBS Morning's co-host Tony Dokoupil is also in Des Moines, and he's been talking to voters and candidates as they make their final pitch ahead of tomorrow. Tony?
Hey, Margaret, good to see you. Just yesterday, we were in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and we were able to catch up with one of the candidates. That would be Nikki Haley, former South Carolina governor. Very cold day, very snowy, but she was able to pack a microbrewery there. And we had a moment with her after her campaign speech in which we talked about her closing message and also something many of our viewers will remember, that hot mic moment when former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie was heard in what he thought was a private conversation talking about Haley and DeSantis after he suspended his own campaign. Here's a little bit of that conversation. Chris Christie had that unfortunate hot mic moment where he said you're going to get smoked in New Hampshire. Have you talked to him since then?
I talked to him after that, yes.
What did he say?
It wasn't what he said. I just said, I appreciate your run. I appreciate you getting in the race. I think you made a difference and wish you well.
You think he's going to endorse you?
I didn't ask for an endorsement.
You didn't
The key was just to let him know that I wished him well. Look, I don't take, politics isn't personal for me like it is with the fellas.
Yeah.
We've got a country to save. I don't care about their pettiness. I don't care about their insults. I care about getting the job done for the American people. That's the problem now. You've got too many thin-skinned people in politics.
You can see the governor there is not slowing down, not letting the cold stop her campaign, although she did acknowledge it's the coldest temperature she's ever experienced, and it could have an effect. Her campaign, however, is saying her supporters are fired up, they're excited, and they're going to turn out. We also asked about something that I heard a lot from voters here over the last 2 weekends, and that's that they like Governor Haley very much. However, they'd like to see her as a vice president underneath President Donald Trump. I asked the former governor about that in particular, and she said, quote, I don't play for second, Margaret, and quote, 4 more years of Donald Trump in the White House would mean chaos.
A word she uses a lot, Tony. Thank you very much for bringing us that interview. We'll be back after a quick break. You're streaming America Decides. CBS has a team of reporters embedded with the political campaigns who have been covering events on the ground over the last few months. Here are their insights into the final hours before the caucuses get underway.
I'm Torian Small in West Des Moines, Iowa, monitoring if an expected Arctic cold could complicate caucus night. With highs of just below 0 degrees, state Republican Party leaders tell me their anticipated record turnout could take a hit. Now, I've been hearing for the past week now that Iowans are used to this bad weather, but these caucus goers tend to be older, and the party confirmed it does not have infrastructure in place to ensure safe travel to and from the more than 700 caucus sites all across the state. So far, this unforgiving winter storm canceled most of the campaign's planned in-person events throughout the week. These candidates are now bracing for the impact of what's likely to be the coldest day in caucus history.
I'm Olivia Rinaldi here at Trump campaign headquarters in Urbandale, Iowa, and behind me, you're starting to get a glimpse of why the Trump campaign feels so confident going into caucus night here. There have been volunteers around the clock making phone calls, reaching those last-minute caucus goers and getting them to turn out for Donald Trump. I also spoke with a senior Trump campaign official who told me that they're increasing their ground game effort to get people to the precincts on Monday night, getting more volunteers with bigger cars to kind of combat those frigid cold temperatures that are threatening to dampen turnout. He told me they know they have the numbers, they know they have the enthusiasm. It's just about getting the most people there on caucus night for them.
I'm Aaron Navarro. I'm the DeSantis campaign reporter for CBS News. The stakes here in Iowa are high for the Florida governor. He has invested a lot of time and money here in the state. His super PAC backing him has spent millions growing his support at a micro level, and he and his team believe that that investment will pay off on caucus night, and they'll be able to turn out supporters during this historic cold. But the Florida governor still has to get past Nikki Haley, who has tied with him here in Iowa or have come within single digits and leads him by large margins in New Hampshire. An underperformance or a third-place finish for DeSantis here in Iowa will only result in more questions from donors and supporters on the viability of his campaign and how long he should stay in this race.
I'm Nidia Cavazos and I'm covering the Nikki Haley campaign, and we're just one day away from the big day. Now, Nikki Haley, as far as Iowa goes, she's been polling in second and third place, so she's counting on a strong showing on caucus night on Monday. Now, Nikki Haley has been making her final pitch to Iowans, telling them if you're ready to move past former President Donald Trump and ready to move on past the political drama and chaos from both parties, then she says she's the right candidate, as she's one who's able to listen to issues from both sides. And this combined with her foreign policy experience, she says she's ready to tackle the country's most imminent national security threats.
I'm Shauna Mizell here in Des Moines, Iowa at the Vivek Ramaswamy campaign headquarters, and the campaign is pushing aside those poll numbers that have had the candidate in the single digits repeatedly. They are projecting a lot of confidence as we head into the Iowa caucuses. Now, I spoke with Ben Yoho, the campaign CEO, and he actually provided a little bit of context into where that confidence is stemming from. Now, Yoho actually told me that internal polling and data that the campaign has gathered over the past few weeks actually shows Ramaswamy neck and neck with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Yoho said that Ramaswamy, according to their data now, is actually in a three-way tie for second place, but we will have to wait to see how this all shakes out on Monday evening.
Our latest CBS News poll, released just hours ago, shows former President Trump with his largest lead among Republican primary voters nationwide thus far this cycle. He's at 69%, 55 points ahead of his nearest rival, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's at 14%. Former UN Ambassador and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is in third with 12%. Looking ahead to the general election in November, our poll shows President Biden trailing all three Republican candidates in hypothetical matchups. Former President Trump is ahead of President Biden, 50 to 48%. Governor DeSantis also leads President Biden 51 to 48, and Haley holds the biggest lead over the incumbent in our poll, 53 to 45%. For more now, we're joined by our Elections and Surveys Executive Director, Anthony Salvanto. So why is this Trump lead growing, and what explains it?
Well, he starts off the primaries with a really solid base of supporters, specifically the most people who say they will only consider him and none of the other candidates, with the most people who say that they won't change their minds about voting for him. The other part of this, though, is he kind of checks all the boxes for different parts of the party, which is to say for people who want someone who will cut taxes, he's their person. For somebody who wants more of the culture war item, somebody who's going to challenge woke ideas, they're voting for Trump. So he's got that spanning across those different parts that also underpins a lot of that support, Margaret.
So then in this head-to-head dynamic, what's driving Nikki Haley? Why does she look like she has the best chance of beating Joe Biden?
Yeah, I mean, she's got a bigger lead over Biden right now than Trump does. All of them are up on him. But for Nikki Haley specifically, first, there are some demographics we go through, right? Key groups that Joe Biden needs to win: women, independents, moderates. Haley is doing now better with all of those. That's number one. And then on the things people tell us they're looking for in a president, qualities like empathy, qualities like toughness, Haley is better or even with Biden on those. So, look, it's early. The polls are not the election, obviously, but clearly the president is starting out a little behind here. And a big reason for that, I've got to add, is the economy. That's an ongoing story. But what we're seeing is, even as people say they think the economy is at least stabilizing, may not be as bad in their minds, he's not getting political credit for that just yet. Sets up a big question going forward, is whether he can change that narrative, Margaret.
Right. And then when you look at what Donald Trump says, there's always that question of, does he mean these campaign slogans? Is it just rhetoric? What did the voters tell you about the things he's saying?
Yeah, well, we tested a bunch of them. And number one, they do largely think he means what he says. These are the Republican primary voters. But there are a few that really you want to take notice of. One of them is the idea of using the federal government to punish or go after political opponents if he's elected. And what's notable there are these splits where MAGA adherents are much more likely than the rest of the party to want him to do that. They're also more likely to want things like pardons for the January 6th rioters, all things that are part of that larger narrative of a stolen election that they have said they believe really since the start of this campaign for years. There are other parts of this, too, where we tested when he made the statement about immigrants poisoning the blood of the country. And you find very high agreement with that statement among MAGA Republicans and among Republicans more widely. And I think that also then speaks to the role of race in the campaign, where you find that a lot of Republicans, a lot of MAGA Republicans, feel that diversity measures in the U.S. have gone too far, and they are overwhelmingly voting for Trump in the general. And I add that again to put the context around as these primaries kick off, as the year kicks off. That's going to be a really big topic.
This is a fascinating poll, and I know some of the details will be available online as well. Anthony, great work here. Thank you. We'll be back after a quick break. You're streaming America Decides.
By the way, she's not up to the job, okay? I can tell you that. I don't want to be mean. If I said that about a man, everyone would say, what a great statement. But I'll tell you about from
And you were listening there to former President Trump. He is addressing his supporters in Indianola, Iowa. His first live and in-person event in a week. And we go now to Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett, who is also at Republican Party headquarters over in Des Moines. Major, good to have you back with us. You know, as we've been talking about on Face the Nation and today, the polling Anthony Salvanto has done that shows most MAGA voters, those hardcore Trump supporters, want the former president to prosecute his opponents if he's elected. Why? Why, if January 6th is a historical event that we all need to move on for, as some of the other Republican candidates say, do his supporters remain focused on that moment?
Well, Margaret, you have to understand, as I know you do, and much of our audience understands, that a lot of the original attraction to then-candidate Trump 2015, 2016 was he was a fighter. He would be aggressive. He would tell it like it is. And for those who are deeply embedded and deeply emotionally attached to the Trump movement, dating all the way back then, that fighter dynamic is vital to understanding their long-running attachment. And they believe that the former president is being unduly and unfairly prosecuted. Some might even use the word persecuted. So they want him to fight back. They do want retribution. They believe, whether it's true or not, that former President Trump's, whatever his conduct, doesn't justify being indicted all these times. And they want him to use the weaponry of the Justice Department, should he become president again, to punish those who they believe unfairly treated their guy. That is to say, former President Trump. Not all Republicans believe that. Our polling shows misgivings among other Republicans who don't identify as MAGA Republicans. But they're still sympathetic with Trump. And I'll talk to you more later in our conversation about how that's played out here in Iowa. But that sympathy is important. It's just not as hardly and tightly aligned as the MAGA desire for retribution, but it's still there.
So when you look, though, at the past performance, and critics of Donald Trump have said if he's at the top of the ticket, Republicans will lose other races. It will have a negative effect on the party overall. How is Trump still dominant then?
Well, it's because he has remade the Republican Party, Margaret, and Iowa is a classic example of that. There is something that in the political science world they call pivot counties from 2016, 2008, 2012, Obama, Trump counties. There are 206 in our country. 31 of them are here in Iowa. No state is more reflective of that transformation of the Republican Party than Iowa. So it's fitting that Trump is on the verge of a very big victory in Iowa, one that could propel him toward the nomination, because this is one of the states in America he is most remade, at least as far as Republican politics is concerned.
Important context. Thank you. And tune in tomorrow for special Iowa coverage on America Decides throughout the day. That's going to be it for us on our special Sunday Iowa Caucus Eve edition of America Decides. Thank you for watching. I'm Margaret Brennan. You're streaming CBS News. Tune in tomorrow for special Iowa coverage throughout the day on CBS News Streaming. That's it for our special Sunday Iowa Caucus Eve edition of America Decides. Thank you for watching. I'm Margaret Brennan, and you're streaming CBS News.